this evening. Tonight I'm going to speak about a very wonderful personality in our line, and that personality is Sanatana Gosvami. I was just joking with the Bai. I said I'm not even going to kid myself about the possibility of finishing Sanatana Gosvami in one evening. Sanatana Goswami's life, there is so much available. We've talked many times in our previous evenings about the difficulty of researching and finding biographies on different personalities in our Gaudiya line. And Sanatana Goswami is not such a personality. We have a vast amount of information available about his life, and it's very wonderful to be able to approach that. Before we start with that, I'd like to read two very nice prayers. Primarily this evening, the works that we'll be drawing from, to a very, very large degree, is the Chaitanya Charitamrita. To an equally substantial degree is the Bhakti Ratnakar. Bhakti Ratnakar is written, you might say, second generation Mahaprabhu, but about his associates. And then also the Gaura Gonadesha Dipika will be the source of some of the information this evening. So I want to start with this prayer by Raghunath Das Goswami, an associate and intimate friend of Sanatana Goswami, and he writes the following. I was unwilling to drink the nectar of devotional service, possessed of renunciation, but Sanatana Goswami, out of his causeless mercy, made me drink it, even though I thought I was unable to do so. Therefore, he is an ocean of mercy. He is very much compassionate to fallen souls like me, and thus it is my duty to offer my respectful obeisances unto his lotus feet and take shelter of him. I particularly like this prayer because we know we spoke a little bit before about Raghunath Das Goswami, and Raghunath Das Goswami is such a highly elevated Vaishnava, the perfect example of the recipient of the mercy of Nityananda Ram, and ultimately of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And he's saying that he's completely unqualified to get the mercy of Sanatana Goswami. So what hope is there for us? This is the wonderful mood that Raghunath is presenting as we begin this evening's discourse. And then from the Gaura Gonadesha Dipika by Kavi Karnapur, he makes a very nice statement here. Rupa Manjari's closest friend, who was known as Rati Manjari, appeared in the pastimes of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu as Sri Sanatana Goswami, who was considered to be a personal extension of the body of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So not only are we describing him as a wonderful Vaishnava, and not only are other wonderful Vaishnavas speaking about how they consider themselves not qualified to get his mercy, but Kavi Karnapur is describing him as a personal extension of the body of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. I mean, this is pretty amazing. So we're going to speak here. There's the item that I've also been discussing over the last few weeks, kind of hinting at, is this work I'm trying to do of researching the birth dates and relative ages of Mahaprabhu's associates to him. And my inspiration and assistant in trying to sort this all out has been my dear friend Dhruva Maharaj Das. I'm on the phone to him all the time, back and forth with this. And just recently I had the good fortune of dragging my buddy Satyaraj Prabhu, who's a renowned author in ISKCON, into this conversation as well. Particularly in the regards of Sanatana and Rupa Goswami, there are two schools of thought. One places their birth some 20 years before Mahaprabhu, and the other places their birth some 2 to 3 years after. If we examine all the details, and I won't go into that tonight because I don't have the paperwork in front of me and all but if we examine all the details, it's much more likely to understand that they were born 2 to 3 years after Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. This makes much greater sense in the overall picture of their life, which we'll hint at a little bit here as we go into this. I would like to stop just a second before we start and welcome two new devotees into the chat room. Karuna Devidasi and Brajadam. Brajadam has told us she's from Toronto. The rest of you that are joining us tonight, if you wouldn't mind, just drop a little line in the chat room. Let us know what city, what country, what nation of the world you're practicing your Krishna consciousness in, as we all join together tonight to practice our own Krishna consciousness in this way. So it's very nice. So the beginning of Sanatana Goswami's life, if we, as I say, if we take it of his birth being in 1488, 2 years after the birth of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, there was a very, very nice Bengali family. They were living in Bengal at the time, East Bengal, what's currently now Bangladesh. We do find that many of our Acharyas' lives began and had a good portion of their existence in what's currently Bangladesh. Unfortunately, Bangladesh is currently under Muslim leadership and has been for quite some time. And many of these Vaishnava places are lost to antiquity, never to be known. So in this village of Jaisor district in East Bengal was a wonderful devotee named Kumar Dev and his wife Revati Devi. And Kumar Dev and Revati Devi, unlike many of the other personalities we've spoken about, had no problem conceiving children. 6 children they had, 5 boys and 1 daughter. And the names of these boys are, 3 are prominent. One of them is Amara, the other one is called Santosh, and the third one is called Balaba. These were the 3 prominent sons of Kumara, Dev, and Revati. Amara and Santosh are the 2 that are most famous as Rupa and Sanatana Goswami. They had their birth name. Of course, we've all got our birth name, and then we have names that we pick up along the way. It's very interesting because sometimes people get the idea, because of the involvement, which we'll get into a little bit later, of the 2 brothers, of actually the entire family, of the entire country they were living in at that time, the influence from the Muslim leadership and the fact that they became ensnared into the service of the Muslim leaders at that time. Many people assume that their Krishna consciousness didn't blossom until the time that they were met by Lord Chaitanya in Ramkeli. This is actually completely incorrect. The description is given that they were very Krishna conscious in their childhood, in their young years, in their studies. There were 2 ponds near their home, and Sanatana and Rupa renamed these ponds Radhakund and Shamakund. And the surrounding trees and forests there, they called this Vrindavan. It was actually referred to in many of the scriptures about them as Gupta Vrindavan, the hidden Vrindavan, because of course it wasn't openly known, but in their minds they considered this to be like Vrindavan, and in this way they were able to focus. Their family deity was called Madan Mohan, and of course Madan Mohan plays an integral part in the later life of Sanatana Goswami. And they had heard about Lord Chaitanya, and they were very desirous to meet him. Very desirous to meet him. But, they never had the opportunity. They never had the opportunity to meet with him. So what happened is that, we'll try to get into this a little bit here, is that the ruler of Bengal at that time, Hussein Shah, had heard from some of his associates about these pious men by the name of Amar and Santosh. And the way it worked was that because the Muslims ruled everything, sometimes they would, how shall we politely say, blackmail other Vaishnavas into service. This is commonly done. Of course, nowadays we associate these types of plots with novels and films that deal with, kidnapping and this and that, and you blackmail someone into doing some crime to get their children freed, like that, whatever. In a similar way, the Muslim kings indicated they would cause a lot of disturbance to the Vaishnava community, to the villages, unless these young men were given to their service. Now, this is one of the points by which I want to lean towards the birth date, as I mentioned, of the 2, of being shortly after Mahaprabhu. Because if we look at that, these boys, when they were young boys, first of all, I should mention Sanatana was educated by Vidyavaskapati. Vidyaveskapati was a very learned Brahminical scholar at the time, and during Santosha's youth, he studied with him. Of course, we can understand Amar probably had the same opportunity to study with him, and he specifically, Santosha learned Srimad Bhagavatam from him. And we'll see later throughout his life that this service to the Bhagavatam really had an impact on him. So in this way, he was in a very, as I say, a high Brahmin family, but what's happened is that these Muslim rulers have, engaged them like this. So the Muslim king decided that, I want these two boys. They were, at the time, we can assume that Sanatana and Santosh and Amar were probably 23 to 25 years old, the two of them. One might have been 23, the other one, 20, and one might have been 25, the other 23. It's a little bit vague, but in that time period. Yet, they were put in very prominent positions in the Muslim kingdom. The position that Santosh was given was as more or less the prime minister, the main political advisor or assistant to the Nawab, and Amara was given the responsibility of financial administrator, chief of the treasury, so to speak. So they accepted these posts, and in this way the Yavana king kind of kept his hands off the rest of the village and the rest of the family like that. So they were very well educated, very highly qualified family, very, very advanced in their knowledge and their learning and their scholarship. So it's not so unlikely at a young age you take the cream of the crop and you train them. Just like, I don't know about the temples out there where you all are listening, but here in our temple in Alachua, we're working with many of the young men and women in our community that are in the early 20s, late 20s, and training them for different services that they'll have to take up for Srila Prabhupada. As much as I try to deny it, I am getting old. And one day all the godbrothers and myself, we're not going to be around, and this service will go on to the next generation. The next generation will have to have received some kind of training in this, so they know what they're doing. In the same way, Hussein Shah heard of these two boys and wanted them, and that he would get a chance to train them further, and they were qualified to do what he wanted them to do. So this is a very important point. And as I mentioned, it leans towards that belief that the later date of birth was appropriate for their lifestyle. So in this way, they continued on with this. Now, their mood is very important here. Let me just find this. It mentions here that Sanatana's father, Kumar Dev, that if he even saw a Muslim, he would do atonement purification processes. He would, different rituals to atone himself for the impurity. Different kind of puja, So in this way, it was really a disappointment to him that his two sons had to be forcefully engaged in the service of this Muslim ruler. So because of this, they wouldn't even go home to their father's home. They considered themselves to have been, completely contaminated by this. It mentions here that for this reason, Santosh considered himself to be on the same level as the Muslims, and as a result, he behaved very humbly. It mentions that because of his association with them, and because they were in a very low type of consciousness, that he would speak of himself in the same way. So this is the beginning of the foundation of the humility that Santosha, by this time actually they've received their Muslim names. When the king engaged them in their service, he gave them Muslim names, Dabir Kash and Sakir Malik. And this became the Muslim names they were known by. Sakir Malik was the name that Santosh was given. And so he took it upon himself. Bhakti Ratnakar describes this mood of humility that Sakir Malik imbibed because of his association, even though being in a Brahmin birth, and even though being qualified, because of his association with these unpleasant Muslim rulers, he considered himself very unfortunate in this way. Bhakti Ratnakar further describes that through Ramananda Roy, Lord Chaitanya destroyed the pride of Cupid. Through Sarup Damodar, Lord Chaitanya demonstrated detachment. Through Haridas Thakur, Lord Chaitanya demonstrated forbearance, and through Rupa and particularly Sanatana, Lord Chaitanya demonstrated humility. Very, very big position, very, very big background, but very, very, very humble individuals. So it mentions in the Chaitanya Charitamrita that through Sanatana's mercy, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami is speaking, and he says, through the mercy of Sanatana Goswami, I have learned the points of the devotional doctrine. So he acknowledges, Krishnadas Kaviraj acknowledges Sanatana as being the source of his being able to really understand what is the proper teachings here. So in this way, the two of them have been engaged in the service of the king, the Muslim king, and they're just kind of doing their thing and keeping a little quiet about it, not making much of a, just quietly desiring to serve the Lord. They actually send a letter to Lord Chaitanya. They jointly send a letter to Lord Chaitanya, because by this time Lord Chaitanya is getting ready to go to Puri. Let me see, they would have been, if they were born a little bit after, it was 23, so this would have been just shortly after Mahaprabhu took sannyas, maybe a year or two. So they're engaged in this service. They send him a letter, and they request him, please come and give us your mercy. Please come and save us. So they're thinking in this way. So during this time, there's a very nice dream that Sanatana, that Sakir Malik, Santosh, we have 3 different names to remember him by, he has a dream one night. And in this dream, this highly renounced, just effulgent personality appears to him and encourages him, do not become distracted by the material wealth that surrounds you. You should look for the opportunity to go and preach and go to Vrindavan. This is a very wonderful dream. So he woke up the next morning thinking, wow, this is great. So he went to his dear brother, Amar, Dabir Kash, and he said to him, I just had this fabulous dream. And he shared the dream with him. And Dabir Kash said, I had the same dream last night. I also, the same effulgent, renounced personality appeared in my dream and instructed me, do not become attached to your material comforts. Prepare to go and preach and live in Vrindavan. So they were very, very happy that they both had this dream. And Dabir Kash confirmed to him, this must be Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's answer to our dream, to our letter. So they were very, very excited about this, very, very happy to know this. So in this way, in due course of time, it was to take place that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu would come to the village of Ramkeli. Now, what was going on is that Mahaprabhu had been in Puri. He had taken sannyas about 5 years earlier, and he's going to begin his first trip to Vrindavan. And he's followed, as you may remember from the description given in Chaitanya Charitamrita, he's followed by thousands upon thousands of personalities. And it's a huge, huge crowded arrangement, which, is not exactly the way you go to Vrindavan, and this will be sorted out later. So, in the process, he makes it clear that he wants to go to the village of Ramkeli. And some of his senior men ask, well, why go to Ramkeli? He says, I want to go to Ramkeli because there are 2 personalities I have to deliver there. Not deliver to Ramkeli, but the living Ramkeli that he's going to deliver. So, in this way, Ramkeli is the, as I mentioned, it's the district headquarters of this Nawab Hussain Shah, and so they decide that they're going to go there, and Mahaprabhu is going to stay there at this time. Now, I should mention that there are in this. This is also the place where this. This is also the place where they described as Gupta Vrindavan. They set up this different mood in their own hearts. Keep in mind that they're devotees from birth. So they're arranging all their surroundings as an opportunity to remember Krishna. So it mentions that there are 5 particular places that one should go to visit in Ramkeli that are connected with the pastimes of Santosh and Amar, are Dabir Kash and Sakir Malik, are, as we are soon to find out, Rupa and Sanatana. The first place is a tamal tree, and a Kadamba tree, both of them, which Mahaprabhu is said to have sat under when he instructed both Rupa and Sanatana, one under each. And there's a shrine there, a little temple containing the footprints of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So this is the first thing. The second thing is the temple of Madan Mohan. This is the family deity, as I mentioned, of Sanatana Goswami. It appears that they were allowed to keep some of their personal customs in their life. Here again, this is, I'm not real clear on this because this part is not as fully detailed, but we can understand you've got these wonderful young men that you're letting run your government, so they've got a little bit of their private life as well. So in this way. The third place is that there are several bathing ghats, or bathing tanks as you might call them, around which they've named Radha Kund, Shama Kund, Surabhi Kund, Lalita Kund, Vishaka Kund, different places to remind them of this Vrindavan time. And then there's a large lake there. It's a large lake that's man-made. It's not like one of the kunds that's normal. It's a man-made lake. And they've named it Rupa Sagara, because this is a place that Rupa Goswami excavated for his own purpose, having that there. And then another one just near there, which was called Sanatana Sagara. So these are two large lakes, and on the banks of both of these lakes, Rupa and Sanatana built large mansions, which is where they lived. So this is the 5 places that one should visit if you ever get to go to Ramkeli. I don't know how many of you had the opportunity to go to Ramkeli. It's a very wonderful place, I'm told. I don't know. So Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came to Ramkeli. Now, an interesting thing happens. As he's coming, he's followed by all of these followers. There's a big to-do, lots of chanting and kirtans going on, and clearly he's the leader of this entire group. So the Muslim king has heard that all the Hindus are assembling to greet this person, and, he's the king. He can understand this is some type of an advanced personality. So he inquires from one of the other Vaishnavas who's been forced into the service of his government, and that person's name is Keshava Khatri. And Keshava Khatri, he says to me, what, this big collection of Hindus coming and this man leading them, who is this personality? He's inquiring like this. So Keshava Khatri, he knows that you can't trust a Muslim. This guy may say this and that, and he may cause trouble for Mahaprabhu, so I'll downplay it. He says to him, he's not anybody really important. I wouldn't pay any attention to him. They're going to be gone in no time anyway. It's, not such a big deal. So the king, to be king, you got to be a little intelligent. So the king is a little thoughtful, and he doesn't believe this answer. So he goes to his Dabrikash. And he goes to Dabrikash, and he says to him, listen, I'm also beginning to think that this person is a great personality. There's no doubt about it in my mind. Please tell me, who is this individual? So Rupa Goswami, he says to him, why are you asking me? You are the king. You are the representative of the personality of Godhead. Ask yourself in your own heart who this is. And then the king confirms, yes, I think that he must be a form of Godhead. This is very unusual for a Muslim king to say this, but this is what he's perceiving. So, anyway, at this time, then they go to Dabrikash and Shakya Malik. They go to meet Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And it mentions that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is not by himself. He's got all of the devotees there. Nityananda's with him. Haridas Thakur is traveling with him. There's a list given here of all the devotees. Here we go. Haridas Thakur, Srivas Pandit, Gadadhar Pandit Goswami, Mukunda Dutt, Jagadananda Pandit, Murari Gupta, Bakreshwar Pandit. All of these different personalities are all there when Sanatana and Rupa, at this point still Dabrikash and Sakir Malik, come to meet Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So when they meet the Lord, here again, as the prayer is given, very, very wonderful prayer is given by the two brothers as they come before Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And I'm going to read this. This is from Chaitanya Charitamrita. They say the following. they supplicate themselves, folded hands before Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and say, we too are millions of times more degraded, more fallen, and more sinful than Jagai and Madhai. We are of a wicked birth because we have chosen to serve the Muslims even though we are from a Brahmin background. Our activities have thus become just like the Muslims. We constantly associate with people who are inimical toward the cows and the Brahmins. This is, of course, the Brahminical culture was oppressed by the Muslim culture at that time in history. And, of course, the Muslims are known for eating cows, which are worshipped by the Brahmins as being sacred. So due to our abominable activities, we are now bound by the neck and the hands and have been thrown into a ditch filled with the evil sense enjoyment. It is very distressful for us that we are so unworthy. Yet, when we see your merciful qualities, we become desirous of obtaining your blessings. This powerful desire rises up in us like that of a dwarf who wants to touch the moon. Now this is a wonderful, wonderful analogy because we try and understand how is it possible to get the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu? How is it possible that a personality like myself has gotten the mercy of Srila Prabhupada? How is it possible that any of us have come in contact with Krishna consciousness? We're all sitting here tonight. We've got this chat room set up. We've got this live webcast going on, and we're discussing Krishna consciousness. There are, needless to say, and not necessary to go into detail, many other people using the same facility of a webcast and chat rooms for many, many other purposes that will not bring them Krishna consciousness. But as the two brothers describe, are compared to a ditch filled with the excrement of evil sense enjoyment. So how is it that we've gotten this mercy? It is because of the blessings of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And they acknowledge this, that their desire to get those blessings is like a dwarf trying to capture the moon. In a very vivid example, we can understand this. How does a dwarf capture the moon? It's not possible. A very short person, but trying to reach for the moon. So this is an analogy to show us how impossible it is that we can become Krishna conscious without the blessings of the spiritual master. And in this case, the direct spiritual master for these two is Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. The Lord hears the humility of the two brothers, and then he responds as such. You two are my servants. From this day forth, you will be known as Rupa and Sanatana. I have come to Bengal just so I could come here to Ramkeli, to this village. Krishna will certainly deliver you from your entanglements here. Do not fear. So this is very wonderful. This is, if you will, the initiation ceremony of Amara and Santosh, who were nice young Brahmin boys, tricked into the service by circumstance of the Muslim leadership and taken the names Dabir Kash and Sakir Malik, but who, when they met Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who was without doubt their spiritual master, they were given the names Rupa and Sanatana. And from this point on, we shall describe them as Rupa and Sanatana and not have to keep track of all these different names. So we'll take a little break here, and I just want to acknowledge some new members that have dropped into the chat room. Jai has joined us from the Philippines. Thank you very much. We're happy to have you here to share in these wonderful pastimes tonight of Sanatana Goswami. And I see up here at the top that Kevan's from Virginia, and Mauricio has joined us from Athens, Ohio. Nice a community there. There used to be a temple there at one time. I don't know if there still is. At any rate, we'll continue on. So the two brothers, after receiving Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mercy, they're greatly concerned about Chaitanya Mahaprabhu because they know that this Muslim leader may be quiet for now, but he can turn, completely. That's his nature. And besides, he's a meat eater. They can't be trusted. His senses are not controlled. He's just, all these different things. So they're very concerned. So they say to the Lord, they say, actually, I apologize. It's not the two of them. It's Sanatana in particular, who is the elder brother. He says to me, he says, you should leave this place, O my Lord. You have no business here. Even though the Shah has faith in you, he cannot be trusted. To go on pilgrimage with such a large company of devotees is also not recommended. You are going to Vrindavan with the entourage of hundreds and thousands of people. This is not the fitting way to go to the holy Dham. And they're very interesting. So he's giving this he's giving this advice like that to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, that there's a more humble, quiet way to go. So in this way, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu continues with his travels, and Rupa and Sanatan, they continue to execute their service. All the time in their hearts, the desire for devotional service, unobstructed by their current circumstances, is growing and growing and growing and growing. Very, very huge desire they have there. So what happens is that Anupam, the youngest of the brothers, and Rupa, they break themselves away. They're able to get out of the service and go off and avoid being entangled in this. But Sanatan, because he was particularly essential to the rulership of the kingdom, he was not able to do so. Excuse me. It mentions that before Rupa resigned from his government service, he deposited, because remember, he was in charge of the treasury, so he had quite a bit of wealth. So he deposited 10,000 gold coins with a local, well, we might call him a banker, but it was actually a grocer. And that was the system. Then they would hold your money for you. They were trustworthy in this way. So he deposited these coins with him. And he took the rest of the accumulated wealth, and it says he divided it as such. This is given in Chaitanya Charitamrita. 50% went to the service of the Vaishnavas and the Brahmins. 25% went to his family members, and 25% was set aside for emergencies. So this was the 10,000 gold coins he set aside. So if that was 25%, then the other 25% would have been another 10,000, right? So there's 20,000 gold coins, and then 50,000. So 40,000 gold coins was his wealth at the time, or at least his bank account. So divided it in that way. So in the meantime, he was able to flee, and he went to Puri to meet with Mahaprabhu. Now, Sanatan was not so fortunate as to get out of this that quickly, because he was a bit more involved in the whole thing. So the Shah, the Hussein Shah, used to treat Sanatan almost like a younger brother, because they were very close. You know, he was his right-hand man in managing the kingdom. And Sanatan thought that the affection of the king, you know, was actually the source of his material bondage. You know, because this personality was a complete materialist, was many bad qualities, which we won't go into. So, you know, he figured if the king gets angry with me, it's going to be easier for me to break away from him. So what I'll do is just quit doing my service. Now, I can speak from exact experience. I've been temple president on 2 occasions and temple commander in a few temples. If somebody's doing some significant service and they suddenly quit, it's pretty annoying. I've had this experience. So this is what Sanatan did. He called in sick. He sent a message to the king, I'm very sick, I can't come. I've come down with some horrible disease and I'm going to have to take a little time off. So in this reason, he stopped performing his duties and coming. What was really happening was he was sitting at home studying the Bhagavatam. You remember that earlier he was trained in the Bhagavatam as a young man and had great affection for the Bhagavatam. And so he was sitting at home studying the Bhagavatam. So what happened was that the Shah, you know, 1 day, 2 days, a week goes by, you know, how sick is Sanatan? So the Shah calls for the court doctor. Please go and investigate, see what is the matter, and cure him. I need him to help me with everything. So the doctor goes and knocks on the door, and he sees that there's Sanatan. He's perfectly healthy. He's perfectly fine. As a matter of fact, he's got a bunch of pundits around him, and they're studying Bhagavatam together. Of course, what better way to cure the illness of the body except to study the Srimad Bhagavatam? So, in this way, the doctor goes back to the Shah, and he reports there's nothing wrong with him. He's just sitting at home studying the Bhagavatam. I don't suggest those of you who are employed try this. So, at any rate, the king hears this, and he himself went to Sanatan, and he spoke to him, and he tried to convince him that you have to return to your ministerial duties, you know. And besides, I'm getting ready to go to Orissa to enact war against the state of Orissa because I want to conquer that state and you have to come with me. Well, Sanatana knew that the state of Orissa is the home of Lord Jagannath and it's the residence of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. I refuse to go with you on this campaign. So he refused. And so the Shah became very upset with him at this point, began to suspect what his real motives were, and he threw him in jail. Locked him up and put him in jail, and then he went off for his war. And, did his battle and all like that. So a very, very interesting thing happens that while Sanatana's in jail, of course, he has a Muslim jailkeeper. Now, the interesting thing is, how did this Muslim jailkeeper get his job? Sanatana arranged for his job. So he actually got the guy hired to be the jailkeeper. So while he was there, he began to persuade this guy, you owe me a favor here. I got you your job and now I'm locked up and you're looking after me. You should just let me go because I want to get out of here. But the jailkeeper wasn't buying it. He was a little bit more afraid of Hussein Shah than he was of Sanatana. So, they back and forth, and he tried to convince him that according to the Muslim tenets, if you release someone who's in bondage, that you become free from the bondage of this world. So the jailer thought for a moment, he thought, no, wasn't having any of it. So then Sanatana had been sent this message, as I mentioned earlier, that Rupa had placed these 10,000 gold coins. Now, at this point, Rupa Goswami, I should back up just a little, I got a tiny bit ahead of myself, I apologize, that Sanatana was continuing with the service and he received a message from Rupa that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is leaving Puri to go to Vrindavan. Do whatever you have to do to get out of this service and come to Vrindavan and join us. So this is the motive by which he began the process of staying at home and studying the Bhagavatam, and to which ultimately he was thrown in jail for. So then what happens is that the gold coins are at his disposal, so he uses them. Rupa Goswami told him, I put these 10,000 gold coins with this grocer, he's banking them, so you use them as you need to. So this is where it comes up. He offers the jailer, he says, all right, look, I've got 5,000 gold coins. You take the 5,000 gold coins and let me go. So to the jailer, the jailer, he's not like the prime minister or the treasurer of finance. He's on a jailer's salary. And he's on a jailer's salary in a Muslim kingdom, so he's not getting so much. So 5,000 gold coins, he begins to contemplate, this might not be a bad idea. No, he's not buying it. He still fears the Shah more. So then Sanatana encourages him. He says, look, I'm going to Mecca. It is every Muslim's duty to go to Mecca on pilgrimage and complete that once in their life. I forget the word. There's a word that describes what it is they're supposed to do in their faith. But at any rate, they're supposed to go to Mecca at least once in their life. And so the jailer begins to think a little bit. No, he's not convinced. So then Sanatana increases it to 7,000 gold coins. And he has the gold coins brought by the grocer. He sends a notice and the grocer brings them and puts them in front of the jailer. 7,000 gold coins. The jailer looks at the gold coins and he suddenly becomes convinced. So he says, but how will we do this? Sanatana says, there's no problem. He says, the Shah has gone to war, so you take me to the Ganga, and then what we'll do is you'll say that you took me to the Ganga to answer nature's call, and then while you were distracted, I jumped in the Ganga and drowned. So in this way, you'll be rid of me. So he's convinced, so this is what they do. He gives him his 7,000 gold coins, and he cuts Sanatana Goswami's chains, releases him from prison, and helps him get across the Ganga to the other side. So, now, I'd like to point out at this point that the idea is a Vaishnava, a Brahmin, is always truthful. A Vaishnava, a Brahmin, does not lie. A Vaishnava, a Brahmin, does not falsely flatter another person. These are not Brahminical qualities. But what was the instruction that his brother Rupa told him? By any means, get out of this situation and come to Vrindavan. And he had been told by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, your ultimate goal in this life is to not get distracted and to come to Vrindavan. So Mahaprabhu and Rupa have already gone, so he wants to join them. So I'd like to just read this a little bit here, describing this. We consider flattery, asking in return for a favor, putting temptation before someone, telling someone to lie, and bribery all to be unethical qualities. Sanatana, however, used all these means at his disposal to escape bondage so that he can join the Lord and engage in his service. To achieve an auspicious end, any means may be used that is permissible. The purity and impurity of a particular means depends on the purity or impurity of the objectives to be obtained. So Sanatana Goswami had to get to Vrindavan. He had to join his brother. He had to directly serve Mahaprabhu. And if it required a little bit of flattery and bribery and misleading of a jailer to get out of jail, so be it. We should be careful before we take this up as our own understanding of how to do things in this world. So, anyway, he gets across. Now, he's got with him one servant, Ishan. Because at this time, everyone traveled with a servant. I mean, nowadays, even you go to India, even a moderately wealthy person, just a middle-class Indian, has a driver, has a dobi wala, somebody that washes their cloth, has a cook that lives in their home. This is common, you know. So what to speak of a wealthy person like Sanatana? He had a servant. So Ishan came with him. Now, they were traveling and this way and that way, and, you know, traveling completely penniless. They have no money. Sanatana Goswami has left the gold coins there. He's given what he had to bribe the getting free, and he's gone on in this way. So they didn't go to the main highway, of course, because, you know, he's a wanted man. You know, the Muslim leader, the Hussein Shah, may or may not believe he's drowned. So he doesn't want to draw attention to himself, so they go through all the back roads. So as they're going through the back roads, they come across a part of, which is the state of Bihar. And to be fair, the state of Bihar has a large percentage of criminals in it. It's the kingdom of Jarasandha. They're his descendants. So, of course, all Vaishnavas are an exception to this rule. But the fact is, the state of Bihar is the home of Jarasandha. So there's a few criminal elements there. So, as they go, they come across an innkeeper. Now, I know this story quite well because I got to play this part of the innkeeper in a dramatic presentation one time. And I played a good scoundrel, I was told. So, at any rate, the innkeeper, his habit is to receive guests, and he keeps an astrologer on the side. And this astrologer is very expert. We've seen this in other pastimes of the Lord's devotees at calculating who's got money and who doesn't. So the astrologer tells him, you know, you've got this mendicant here, but he's not really a mendicant. His servant has 8 gold coins. Ishan had taken 8 gold coins and was keeping them quietly. He wasn't thinking, I'll keep them for myself. He was thinking, these may be necessary for the service of Mahaprabhu. Let me just quietly keep them. I mean, for the service of Sanatana, excuse me. So, in this way, the innkeeper sees Sanatana and he comes before him. He says, oh, my dear sir, how nice of you to join us here. Please, please, have a seat at my best table. Let me arrange for some meals for you. So he arranged to have food brought, and I have a room where you can stay. Let me give you the best room in the house. After all, we are here to accommodate the needs of the pilgrims. So he's going on and on like this. Now, remember, Sanatana Goswami has just come from a very political training. He's expert in politics and diplomacy and connivery. He sees all of this, so he knows what's going on. So he thinks to himself, this guy doesn't know me from anyone. I'm not particularly dressed fancy. But he's treating me like a special person. So he concludes. So they get to their room that evening. He calls Ishan. Ishan? Yes, Sanatana, how may I serve you? Ishan, do you have some gold coins? And Ishan hangs his head. And he says, yes, my dear Lord, I have 7 gold coins. Ha 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 ha. So Sanatana says, give me these 7 gold coins. You have almost gotten us killed for these gold coins. This is not very smart on your part. Give me the gold coins. So he takes the gold coins and he goes to the innkeeper. Sanatana says, my dear sir, here I have a present to give to you. And he gives him the 7 gold coins. And the innkeeper says, oh, what is this for? He says, I know what is going on here, so please, you do me a favor. My servant has taken these 7 gold coins without my knowledge. You take them and save me from this type of temptation in the future. If you do not kill me and take them, someone else may attempt it. So let me give them to you. So the innkeeper is very, very touched by this. Very, very touched. He says, my dear sir, I actually knew that you had 8 gold coins. It's true. And I actually was going to pillage you. And I actually was going to steal your coins. But you have touched my heart with your honesty, so I won't do this. So Sanatana makes a note. Oh, the man says I had 8 gold coins, but Ishan told me he only had 7. He puts that little thing in the back of his head there. So then he says, if you will be so kind to help us on our journey. So the next distance coming is a very difficult path. So the man says, I will personally guide you on this path so that you'll be safe from any other, miscreants or pillages or anything like that. So he gets them over the hilly region, that part of the country, and then he says goodbye to them. At this point, before crossing into the next part of their journey, Sanatana turns to Ishan. He says, Ishan, you have another gold coin you've been keeping from me. And Ishan hangs his head. He says, yes. He says, it is true, I have kept a gold coin. So Sanatana says to Ishan, he says that your attachment has not been given up to these gold. Gold represents a comfortable lifestyle, material attraction, material opulence. You are not ready for the renounced order of life. You are too dependent on material conditions. You are not qualified for a life of renunciation. Therefore, with my blessings, keep the gold coin and return. And he sends him away. And that's the end of it. So it mentions how that Sanatana continues on. Excuse me just a moment. He comes to a town on the bank of the Ganga called Patna. Patna is a very nice place. Patna is famous for its animal auctions. If you need to buy cows, if you need to get oxen, if you need some good strong horses, you go to Patna. This is where. If you need some camels for your business to haul bullock carts, you go to Patna. This is where they're sold. I have one devotee friend of mine who's from the town of Patna. Matter of fact, his family donated their family home as the temple in Patna. And they built the temple now, but at any rate. So Sanatana's brother-in-law, Shrikant, because remember he had one sister. So the sister married Shrikant, and they lived there in the town of Patna. And so Shrikant allowed him to stay there for a few days, of course. He's very happy to see the brother-in-law come. And let him recuperate from his travels and his journey and the difficult times and all like that. And so Shrikant wanted to make a gift to him. You're traveling, you don't have anything with you, it's awkward. Let me give you this valuable gift. So he gave him a very, very valuable wool blanket. Very, very nice and attractive and beautiful to look at like this. So Sanatana continued on, and he soon enough arrived in the city of Benares. Benares is, of course, on the bank of the Ganges. It's a very, very wonderful place. And it turned out that who was in the city of Benares at that time? Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So he was very, very happy. And Mahaprabhu was staying at the home of Chandrasekhar Acharya. So Chandrasekhar Acharya was taking nice care of his needs and all. And so one day, Sanatana Goswami wanted to go to visit the Lord, but he didn't want to go directly. So he went to the house of Chandrasekhar Acharya and he sat on the front porch. So Mahaprabhu was inside, and he said to Chandrasekhar, he said, a great Vaishnava has just arrived. Please go and bring him in to me. So Chandrasekhar goes out front, then he looks to the left, and he looks to the right, and he doesn't see any great Vaishnava. He doesn't, there's nobody out here. So he goes back into the Lord. He says, my dear Lord, there's no one here. I'm sorry, I looked and I didn't see him. So Mahaprabhu says, did you see anyone? Well, yeah, there was some Muslim mendicant traveler out there with long hair and a beard and some, Muslim dress on and had some like that, but no Vaishnava. Mahaprabhu laughed. He said, yes, that is Sanatana. Go and bring him in to me. So he went and he brought him in. And it mentions that when Sanatana entered, Mahaprabhu immediately went forward and embraced him, hugged him to his chest, so happy to see Sanatana and that he was safe. So it mentions that a affection that was exchanged and the ecstatic symptoms that the two experienced were beyond description. Very, very wonderful. So, in his affection for Sanatana, sometimes you see an old friend and you really extend yourself to them in a very warm way. So Mahaprabhu saw Sanatana, and what he did was begin to brush the dust off of his body from his travels. Sanatana was completely uncomfortable with this. He didn't want this kind of attention. So he told the Lord, please, my dear Lord, no, don't touch me. My body's not fit to be touched by you. And the Lord gave a very nice response, and this is from the Chaitanya Charitamrita. He says, I touch you in order to purify myself. Your devotional force is so great that you can purify the entire universe. I look at you, I touch you, and I sing your glories. By doing this, all of my senses attain their perfect use. Now, I think that as aspiring Vaishnavas, this is a wonderful instruction for us. We live in a community of devotees, whether we're in Athens up here, or whether we're in the Philippines, or whether we're in Virginia, all these different devotees that have joined us, we're all living in a community of Vaishnavas. And that community of Vaishnavas means an opportunity to serve devotees. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself, Sanatana Goswami is not the Lord. Sanatana Goswami is a devotee of the Lord. And Sanatana Goswami, he is served by the Lord himself. The Lord says, I touch you, I look at you, and I sing your glories because my senses attain their perfect use by doing so. So in this way, the service to the Vaishnavas is the thing that Mahaprabhu is stressing. So this should be an impetus to all of us, that let me also serve the Vaishnavas. Let me also engage in the service of the devotees of the Lord. So very, very nice. So while while Mahaprabhu was staying there in Benares, he was taking his meals at the home of Tapan Mishra. He was staying with Chandrasekhar Acharya, but eating his meals at the home of Tapan Mishra. And Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu introduced Sanatana Goswami. This is Tapan Mishra. This is Chandrasekhar Acharya. Very wonderful devotees living here like that. So, after many days of being in prison and on the road and living in the Muslim community, as I mentioned, he had very long hair and a long beard, and he looked like a Muslim mendicant. He didn't look like a Vaishnava. This is how Chandrasekhar Acharya wasn't able to recognize him. So the Lord told Sanatana, he said, you should go and shave. You should look respectable. Vaishnavas are in general clean shaven, neither growing beard nor mustache. This is the instruction. Yeah. Now, of course, the exception is given that during the Chaturmasya time, when it is quite common that the Vaishnavas will not shave for 4 months. But this not shaving is not the only thing they do. There's restrictions on the eating, restrictions on where one sleeps, on how much one sleeps, all these things. So Chaturmasya is a time of year. Matter of fact, it starts at the end of this week. And I'll just take a quick little detour here, since it's mentioned, because Chaturmasya is the beginning of the rainy season. We described in the story of Gopal Bhatta Goswami that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was traveling, but during the Chaturmasya season he was in South India, so he stopped and didn't travel, because Chaturmasya means just after the Rath Yatra. That's the beginning of the Chaturmasya season, and the rain comes, and it rains for 4 months. And during that it's very difficult to travel, so a sannyasi stays in one place. Now, staying in one place is not generally the habit of a sannyasi, because what happens? You stay in one place, you get comfortable there, So while staying in that one place for 4 months, they would perform austerities. The directions for how to perform Chaturmasya are given in the Hari Bhakti Vilas, which was compiled by Gopal Bhatta Goswami, and later we'll hear about was edited and produced by Sanatana Goswami. But the directions are given. There are 32 vows that one can take in the execution of Chaturmasya. Not taking any honey, not using any salt, not eating any certain types of foods, eating only once a day, eating off the floor, not shaving, sleeping on the floor, increasing the amount of japa one chants, increasing the hearing and chanting, performing kirtan, a whole list like this, 32 different vows that one can take. And as I mentioned, during this time one doesn't shave. One grows. So in this way, we see that because it wasn't Chaturmasi at this time, Mahaprabhu was encouraging that Sanatana Goswami should shave. And so that's why he told him, you should look respectable. So in this way, Sanatana Goswami went to the Ganga and he shaved. Shaved his face, shaved his head, got rid of all the hair like this. And he came back to the house, and Chandrasekhar Acharya saw him and said, you look so wonderful. Let me give you some new cloth to wear so it will make your look as a Vaishnava very nice. And Sanatana refused. He said, no. He said, I am satisfied with the simple ragged cloth that I'm wearing. I do not need anything more. He actually said, one's desire to worship the Lord, if one's desire to worship the Lord is real, one becomes indifferent to nice clothes and good food. So in this way, he didn't want to accept anything. But he kept this blanket because it was a practical thing. He needed a chadar when it would get cold, or he would use it to lie down like that. So in this way, he came before... excuse me one second. Right. I'm sorry. So I lost my train of thought. My apologies. So in this way, he continued associating with Mahaprabhu at this time, but he detected there was a tint of dissatisfaction in Mahaprabhu, but Mahaprabhu wasn't saying anything. So he understood it must have been because of this expensive blanket, this wool blanket he was carrying. So it mentions that there was one Vaishnava, a Brahmin, who invited Sanatana to come to his house and take prasadam, because he was a traveling mendicant and he was an associate of Mahaprabhu, so he wanted to invite someone, so he invited him, you come and take some prasadam. Now, the thing is, he came to stay with him, but Sanatana Goswami wouldn't eat with him because, he performed madhukari. He would only go about and, bake 3 or 4 pieces of bread like that, and that's how he would eat. So the Brahmin wanted to invite him, but he wasn't able to accept it. So his cloth, as I mentioned, he kept torn cloth and just a little top piece that he wore, like a shawl like this. But he had this blanket. And whenever he'd go to Mahaprabhu, Mahaprabhu would repeatedly look at this blanket. So he thought, Mahaprabhu's always looking at my blanket. Why is Mahaprabhu always looking at my blanket? So he understood that he's not satisfied with it. So he went to the Ganga and he found one old beggar man who had just torn cloth like him, but also had old ragged blanket. Now you may have seen, those of you that have had the opportunity to go to India may have seen some beggar person or some mendicant of lesser position traveling with some old cloth like that. There's one particular person I can think of that every time I've gone to Govardhan since 1970, the same sadhu is there going around Govardhan Hill. And he's got very old things, dressed very, simply, and this old blanket that he lays on and sleeps on like that. So, someone like this, Sanatana Goswami saw, and he went to the person. He said, my dear sir, will you please trade me your blanket? I'll give you this fancy blanket. You give me your old one. And the man looked up, and he was a little bit indignant at first. He said, why do you make fun of me? I've got such a difficult situation in my life anyway, and now you, some comfortable man with some nice opulent blanket, come to make fun of me. He said, no. He said, I'm sincere. I do not want to keep this symbol of opulence anymore. I would like to give it to you. So, please, will you trade with me? So, well, if that's the case, certainly. So, the man gave it to him. So, then, he went back to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and he noticed that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was smiling, was very happy. So Mahaprabhu said to him, this is from the Chaitanya Charitamrita, he said the following thing. I have been thinking about this. It seems that since Lord Krishna is very merciful, he has now cured you of your disease of attachment to sense enjoyment. Why then would he allow you to hold fast to this last bit of material enjoyment? After restoring to someone to health, a good physician does not allow any trace of the disease to remain. It is contradictory to practice madhukari, going home to home and begging 3-4 chapatis a day, while wearing a blanket that is worth the value of 3 gold coins. By doing so, you would have lost your spiritual strength and become a laughing stock. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, this was mentioned in class here in Alachua just the other day, also gave some particular instructions that one should not adorn himself unnecessarily, particularly in the renunciate or the brahmacharis, the sannyasis, should not excessively adorn themselves in fancy cloth like that, even for the sake of going out in the public. So in this way, he gave him this very crucial instruction. And so now the Lord then began to take this opportunity. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu continues with his travels, and Rupa and Sanatan, they continue to execute their service. All the time in their hearts, the desire for devotional service, unobstructed by their current circumstances, is growing and growing and growing and growing. Very, very huge desire they have there. So what happens is that being there in Benares with him and preached to him, and he began to instruct him in the principles of Krishna consciousness. Now Sanatan started this off, and he replied to the Lord. He said, I was born in a low family, and I have always associated with low-class men. I am fallen and the lowest of men. Indeed, I have fallen into the well of sinful materialism and passed my whole life residing there. I have no idea what is beneficial for me and what is not. In ordinary dealings, people consider me wise. I have also come to think of myself as such. You have mercifully delivered me from the materialistic path. Now, by the causeless mercy of your association, please explain to me what is my duty. I do not know who I am, why the threefold miseries constantly wear me down, so how can I obtain the highest good? Actually, I do not even know how to inquire about the goal of life and the process for attaining it. Please be merciful and explain all of these things to me. This is the beginning of what's a very famously quoted verse of Sanatana Goswami, Ke Ami, who am I? What is my purpose? People think I am a great man. People give me glorification. They say I am very learned, that I am very knowledgeable, but I don't even know who I am. So this is a very relevant point to our society nowadays, both in the mundane sense as we look into the greater society and see sports personalities or entertainment personalities, or what to speak of, much less than that, individuals put forward as being very prominent, very noteworthy, and we should be very concerned about their life and what they did and when they did it and who they did it with and where they were going with, all these things. But people do not even know who they really are themselves. So what to speak of these personalities that can't teach them? Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is being inquired from Sanatan. And Sanatan, we know, is qualified. He studied the Srimad Bhagavatam as a child. He's very materially educated. He has great sense of devotion. He understands previously from meeting with Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu the purpose of his life. He comes from a good Brahmin family, all good qualities, but he considers himself quite the opposite, because if you remember, Sri Chaitanya mentions that from Sanatan I will give the example of humility. So in this way, this is his question, who am I? What is my purpose in life? So Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu gives the following instructions to him. He teaches him that all living beings have a true identity, and that identity is as a servant of Krishna. Jiva Sarup Hoy Nitya Krishna Das, that we are all eternally the servant of Krishna. That is the servant of the Lord. And that the Jiva is the marginal energy. And due to our being marginal energy, not spiritual and not material, but marginal, this means we can go either direction. And because of this, we have to be very careful about the association we have. So Mahaprabhu explained all of these things to him. Actually, there's one entire book in the Chaitanya Charitamrita 17 volumes that the Srila Prabhupada produced that deals with the teachings of Mahaprabhu to Sanatana Goswami. Very, very wonderful chapter, very detailed, very deep instruction on what is the real goal of life. So in this way, he explained all these things to him, gave all the different instructions, and then concluded all of the instructions to Sanatana Goswami with this verse called the Atmarama verse. Self-satisfied sages who were freed from any bondage also engage in unmotivated service of Sri Krishna, whose activities are wonderful. Such are the transcendently attractive features of Sri Hari. So Mahaprabhu, at the time of speaking with Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, Mahaprabhu gave him 18 different explanations of the Srimad Bhagavatam. And Sanatana Goswami said to the Lord, "My dear Lord, I would like to hear these explanations. Can you please give them to me?" And Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu gave him 61 different explanations of the Bhagavatam. So this is the culmination of Sanatana Goswami being fully charged and fully primed to now go to Vrindavan and start his real life work, which is to establish the holy places of Radha and Krishna that have been lost by time, and to write books to present the teachings that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has just given to him. So it's now 20 minutes after 9, and we started a bit late. I said we'd go a little later, and we've gone a little later than later. And I'm very happy to do that. Abai is encouraging me to go on. I have so much more information here. But as I mentioned at the beginning, I had no intention of speaking about Sanatana Goswami all in one night. We have brought this story of Sanatana Goswami up to the point to where he goes to Braj. So we will continue this next week with Sanatana Goswami's arrival in Vrindavan and what his activities in Vrindavan will be, and how he will perfect his process of devotional service, and how he will ultimately join the supreme pastimes of the Brajadam. Of course, this is the wonder of associating with Vaishnavas. We can go on and on and on and on and on talking about the devotees of the Lord, and we can go on and on and on discussing the devotees of the Lord. This is the wonderful process of Krishna consciousness, that there is no end to the spiritual potency. Only our ability in our material body and our material mind to keep up with that is what is there. We're going to finish here for the evening, and we thank you very much for joining us for another night in the lives of the Vaishnavacharyas. Hare Krishna.